I'm Iona, I'm a librarian at Richmond Libraries, and to end LGBTQ plus History Month, I've got a stack of books on LGBTQ plus history that I'd like to recommend to you. All of the books that I'm recommending today are available in hard copy in our Richmond Libraries collections, and many of them can also be found on our digital e-library services, and I will put links in the description to them so you know where to find them. Quite a few books, so let's get started. The first book I'd like to recommend is Pride, the Story of the LGBTQ Equality Movement by Matthew Todd, which looks like this. It's a pretty thick book, but it is in easily digestible chunks. There's quite a lot of chapters. There's also some beautiful photographs. There is full-page colour photography throughout the book. And the book is also broken up by personal testimony sections of LGBTQ plus icons. It's a beautiful book. It's a bit of a coffee table book and it's quite large, so maybe bring a bag if you're getting it out of the library, but I would highly recommend it and it's incredibly informative. The second book I'd like to recommend is Sensible Footwear, A Girl's Guide by Kate Charlesworth. This is a graphic novel. It's a graphic memoir by Charlesworth, but it is broken up. There are sections on LGBTQ plus history which put the memoir sections into context so you know what's going on in broader society throughout Charlesworth's life. This is what the memoir sections look like. Obviously, being a graphic novel, it is an absolutely beautiful book, but it's also deeply moving. At times it is utterly heartbreaking, and at times it is wonderfully hopeful. There's also sections on LGBTQ icons. It is a wonderful book, despite starting the book by pointing out that as a lesbian memoir, Kate Charlesworth doesn't intend this to be an all-inclusive overview of LGBTQ plus history. It's actually one of the most comprehensive books that I've found looking at LGBTQ plus history in Britain. There is stuff in here that I have not found in any other book, so I would highly recommend this. It's also a very easy read and very fun, and Kate Charlesworth has some incredible wit which comes through in a lot of the book. My next choice is Outrageous, the Story of Section 28 and Britain's Battle for LGBT Education by Paul Baker. Some of you may have read Baker's book on Polari, which came out a few years ago. This has just been published. It is a fantastic book. Despite the fact that Baker is an academic and this is a really comprehensive book, it looks at the run-up to Section 28 being proposed and introduced. It tells you exactly what it means to have something called Section 28 or Clause 28 or Clause 29 or Section 2A. It explains all of those terms and exactly what happens in a bill becoming law, which is context that is really desperately needed and a lot of books leave out when talking about Section 28. It then talks about the effect Section 28 had, the protests against Section 28, and ultimately the repeal and the effect of Section 28 to this day. It's actually a very, very easy read. It might sound daunting, but it's not. It's incredibly informative and chatty. Paul Baker's very funny. Some of the captions for his pictures are particularly amusing. Even if you don't want to read the book, I'd recommend flicking through if you fancy a chortle at the expense of some homophobes. But it is a wonderful book and it's also very pretty. The next choice I have is By the Way, The Bisexual Guide to Life by Lois Shearing, which looks like this. This is a book that looks at bisexuality, and it has entire chapters on the history of bisexuality, as well as explaining what bisexuality means today, where it has come from, and previous movements within bisexuality to fight for the rights of bisexuals, both within the LGBTQ movement and within broader society. It's an incredibly informal book. It's a very quick read, but there's a lot in there, again, that you won't find in other books on LGBTQ plus history, so I highly recommend that. The next book I have is Trans Britain, Our Journey from the Shadows, which is edited by Christine Burns, author, activist and all-around icon. This is a fantastic book. It is the Bible for trans history in the UK. It is absolutely the place to start if you want to know more or anything about trans people in Britain. It's an anthology, and it takes the form of essays, and as you can see, they're illustrated. There are pictures throughout it. The essays are organised into rough thematic chapters and introduced by Christine Burns. Some of them are more memoir type essays, some of them are more overviews of, for example, trans people in the media or in arts. It's a fantastic book to dip into as well as to read cover to cover. Again, highly recommend this one. My last true non-fiction recommendation is Female Husbands, A Trans History by Jen Mannion, which looks like this. This book is slightly more academic in tone than the other books I've been recommending, but it is well worth getting through. It looks at the specific female husband phenomenon that was picked up by newspapers in the UK and then across the pond in America in the late 1700s and early 1800s. What this book does brilliantly, especially in terms of LGBTQ plus history, is it meets the people on their own terms, in their own context. So Jen Mannion makes no claims as to whether these female husbands were lesbian or bisexual women, trans men, non-binary people, or just straight women who wanted to break out of the roles prescribed to them in society of the time. It looks at a variety of case studies. It looks at the wives of female husbands. It looks at how these stories were reported in the press and published as pamphlets. And it looks at specific sections of society where female husbands were to be found, including, for example, sailors in the Royal Navy. It goes from Britain, the UK, and particularly England in the late 1700s before moving across to America in the 1800s, and it links together various individuals and newspaper reports that were reported on both sides of the pond and looks at the influences that had both on our understanding of queer history and on the media and reporting of these stories. It is a fantastic book. Finally, before Achilles and Patroclus, there was Gilgamesh and Enkidu. The Epic of Gilgamesh is arguably the first work of fiction, certainly the first epic poem that we have recorded. It is an astonishing piece of work. It was first written down probably about 4,000 years ago and likely existed in oral form well before that. What's really astonishing about the Epic of Gilgamesh is that, unlike many of the works that we have from that time, you can read this today and completely understand where it's coming from. It still speaks to you because it speaks to the human condition. It speaks of fear of mortality, death of your loved ones and yourself, of the struggle for wisdom and power and the ability to use power wisely and justly. And it's a really, really good story. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, depending on the translation and depending on the fragment of the text you are reading, are now generally considered by many scholars to be in a same-sex relationship. They are also in relationships with other people throughout the text. Indeed, Enkidu is first humanized through sex with a devotee of Ishtar right at the beginning of the epic poem, which makes them arguably the first bisexual protagonists that we have in literature if we want to ascribe a modern label onto them. We have a variety of translations and copies of the Epic of Gilgamesh in our libraries. This one by Stephen Mitchell I'm particularly fond of. It really focuses on the power of the language within the text, but if you search for Gilgamesh on our library catalogue, richmond.spiders.co.uk, you will find a bunch of different copies of this, and I highly, highly recommend it, as well as for being our oldest text by far in this group of recommendations. So I hope there's something there to interest you. This is only a tiny selection of the LGBTQ plus historical books that we have in our collections. So please go online, go to our online catalogue, again that will be linked below, or go to your nearest library and see what we have to offer you. Happy reading!